Out here, speed was never a luxury. It was survival. A message that arrived too late meant a town went hungry. A herd that moved too slow meant a trail boss went broke. A patrol without fresh mounts meant men didn't come home. We talk about the West as distance, endless grass, endless sky, endless horizon. But the real story of the West is how the distance was defeated. Not by engines, not by rail, not by wire, but by muscle, by hide, by hoof. Because before there was a cowboy, there was a horse. Howdy, Chip Schweiger here. Welcome to another edition of Way Out West, the podcast that takes you on a journey through the stories of the American West, brings you the very best cowboy wisdom, and celebrates the legacy of the American cowboy. There's a certain light that you only find in the wide country. Early morning, before the wind comes up, before the first gate opens. A saddle horse stands quiet in the dust, one hind leg cocked, steam lifting off his back into the cool air. Leather creaks, a bridle chain ticks. Somewhere out beyond the pens, cattle are beginning to stir. For generations, that sound, that rhythm, was the heartbeat of the West. Not wagons, not railroads, not towns. Horseflesh. So today on the show, we're talking about an animal that turned space into motion and motion into history. A partner that carried men into storms, across rivers, through war, into markets, and back home again. After the episode, check out the show notes at wayoutwestpod.com/horse. Welcome back. Today we're going to take a step back, not into a single cattle drive, not into a single battle, not into one legend or one outlaw. We're going to look at the animal that made all of it possible. The American West, as we imagine it, only exists because of one thing: speed. And in the West, speed meant horseflesh. Before the horse returned to North America, this continent was vast in a way that's really hard for us to grasp now. Distance wasn't measured in miles. It was measured in days, in exhaustion, in how much a man could carry on his own back. Then the horse came back, and everything changed. It's worth remembering horses are native to North America. They evolved here. Then, at the end of the last ice age, they vanished. For thousands of years, none. Until the Spanish brought them back in the 1500s. When Hernán Cortés landed in Mexico in 1519, he brought 16 horses. Just 16. But those animals carried something far greater than their weight. They carried momentum. From Spanish expeditions into the Southwest, horses moved north. Some were traded, some were stolen, some escaped and went wild. Herds multiplied across hard country. No fences, no barns, no human protection. Only survival. The Mustang was born there. Spanish bloodlines and unforgiving land. By the 1700s, the horse was no longer a European tool on American soil. It had become a continental force. No one adopted the horse more completely or more brilliantly than the tribes of the Great Plains. Within a few generations, foot cultures became mounted nations. The Comanche are the most dramatic example. So skilled, so mobile, so dominant that historians sometimes call them a mounted empire. Comancheria stretched across what is now Texas, New Mexico, Oklahoma, and beyond. Mobility became power. A mounted warrior could travel further, hunt more efficiently, strike faster, disappear quicker. Buffalo hunting changed, warfare changed, trade changed, and status changed. Horse ownership reshaped society. We talk about independence in the West, but independence rode on four legs. If you've listened to the earlier episode on the war horses of the West, you've heard part of that story. Cavalry mounts, battlefield endurance, but that was just one chapter. This is the larger transformation. Because long before the United States pushed west in force, the balance of power on the plains was already determined by the horse. When American trappers, traders, and explorers entered the region, they didn't bring speed with them. They found it already there. The mountain men didn't carry their lives on their backs. They packed them on horses and mules. Winter gear, traps, pelts, trade goods. All of it moved by animal power. Wagon trains to Oregon and California? Without draft teams, they didn't make it out of Missouri. And when gold was discovered in California in 1848, the news didn't travel by telegraph. It traveled by horse. Speed compresses geography. It turns rumor into opportunity. It turns maps into destinations. The horse did that. After the Civil War, Texas had cattle, millions of head of them. What it didn't have was a nearby market. Railheads sat hundreds of miles north. Kansas became the funnel. Abilene, Dodge City, Ellsworth. Between Texas and Kansas, rivers, storms, rustlers, open country. The solution was mounted labor. A trail drive might move 3,000 head, 10 to 15 cowboys. But each cowboy didn't ride just one horse, he rode several. A remuda, often dozens of horses or more, traveled with the herd. Fresh mounts rotated in every day. Night guards rode in shifts, keeping cattle calm, preventing stampedes. Without the depth of horsepower, the drive collapses. The cattle kingdom was not built on hats and spurs. It was built on endurance. Every steakhouse in Chicago, every rail shipment east, owed a quiet debt to the horseflesh of the plains. The railroad completed the network, but the horse made the railroad reachable. It lasted only 19 months, April 1860 to October 1861. But the Pony Express captured the imagination of a nation. Nearly 2,000 miles of mail, St. Joseph to Sacramento. Relay stations every 10 to 15 miles. A rider gallops in, leaps off, swings onto a fresh mount, and runs again. The mail moved in about 10 days. Now in that era, that felt like lightning. For a moment, muscle outran wire. And it did so because horses could sustain organized velocity across a continent. As settlement increased, so did conflict. Infantry alone could not police the plains. The army needed mobility. It needed horses. But here's the irony. Their mounts were often larger and bred for European warfare. Plains tribes rode smaller, tougher ponies, adapted to harsh country. Endurance beat size, logistics became everything. No water, no remounts, no campaign. A cavalry unit without horses, well, it was just a group of men too far from home. The West wasn't contested by policy alone. It was contested by supply lines, and supply lines moved on hooves. Then came barbed wire. Railroads, towns, the open range closed. The horse didn't disappear, though. It just changed jobs. From frontier necessity to ranch partner. From military mount to agricultural power. For decades, even after automobiles, horses plowed fields, hauled freight, ran city delivery routes. The horse didn't just build the frontier, it carried the West into modern times. Then slowly stepped aside. Think about this. The West's reputation for independence comes from mobility. A man who can ride 50 miles in a day is not trapped by geography. A ranch that can drive cattle hundreds of miles enters national markets. The horse shrank isolation, but it preserved space. And that paradox is the West. Wide horizons, connected by hoofbeats. Remove the horse from our imagery, and the story goes still. With it, the West is alive. The automobile replaced the horse on the highway. The tractor replaced it in many fields. Mechanics changed ranching, but not the partnership. Even now, on a modern ranch, there is work a machine cannot do. Sorting cattle in tight pens, crossing rough country, reading livestock. That requires feel, not equipment. The horse made the West economically viable, militarily contestable, culturally iconic. And even after engines took over, horses remained stitched into the character of the region. The American West didn't rise because it was empty. It rose because it moved. And for centuries, movement meant muscle, hide, and hoof. So when we talk about the West, we're not just talking about land. We're talking about velocity, about the animal that came home after thousands of years and reshaped a continent. Okay, before we close out for this week, we've got just one more thing. Yep, that distinctive call from Buster the Bull means it's time for our cowboy glossary term of the week. And this week's term is a McClellan saddle. So the McClellan saddle was developed for the U.S. cavalry in 1859, designed to be lightweight, durable, and comfortable for both horse and rider over long distances. With its open seat, rawhide covered tree, and minimal padding, it could be repaired in the field and ridden hard in brutal conditions. It wasn't fancy, but it could travel. And in the West, that's what mattered. Well, that's about all for this episode of Way Out West. I appreciate you spending part of your day with me and hope you'll never look at a set of tracks in the dust or a remuda gathered at daylight quite the same way again. Because the story of the West is the story of motion, and motion started in the saddle. Next week on Way Out West, we're going to talk about a time when a man's reputation traveled faster than he did, when deals were made without paper, when a handshake could move cattle, land, or a life's worth of work. No lawyers, no contracts, just your name and what it was worth. Because in the West, your word wasn't part of your character, it was your character. Until next time, this is Chip Schweiger reminding you that long before the West was connected by highways, it was carried there one hoofbeat at a time. We'll see you down the road.